Hello.
Hi. So you said the last time we spoke, which was such a long time ago now,
It's bloody ages. So
literally seconds, that you
I
had
have
some follow-up
some
from the
follow-up.
week before last.
Yeah, when the episode which was about me
Jumping out of windows.
jumping off balconies,
yeah.
falling off balconies, etc., etc. And you came up with something about imagining a baby being thrown.
Yes. I think I was imagining a baby being thrown off a balcony. I also imagined stamping on a chihuahua.
This is a podcast in which two friends talk about the pleasures, absurdities, and imperfections of being human. I'm Simon Ellis.
And I'm Lee Miller. Welcome to Midlifing.
It took all my powers of all my discipline to not make that the show title. Although maybe I did. I can't remember now. Anyway, 2 weeks ago.
You did something about Superman, I think.
Oh, yes, I did. Thank you. Oh, so you check?
I read them. I don't check. I'm not checking up on you. Anyway, a few weeks ago, Superman, Windows, plummeting, babies.
Yeah. So this is some follow-up because a colleague at work, absolutely long-term listener of the show, said to me, "Oh, do you know about intrusive thoughts?" And it's a thing. What we were describing is a thing in psychology called, you'll believe it or not, intrusive thoughts.
Are these? I'm going to take a swing. Are these thoughts that are intrusive?
I think they've been named very, very well by psychologists of yore.
Wowzerinos.
And they're worth having a look at. But that's what we were describing, as far as I can tell, were instances of intrusive thoughts. And they are, and the way they're described online, I didn't do any self-diagnosis because that's a whole other episode about self-diagnosis. And the way in which it's written about is that they are instances of or expressions of anxiety. But it was weird for me to hear that / read it, because after my colleague mentioned intrusive thoughts, or as you've so capably said, thoughts that are intrusive, I had a look and I went, oh, it's weird about anxiety, because I guess my question for this episode is, do you think of yourself as an anxious person? And because I did, when I was thinking about that, I went, it doesn't feel like in my body, it doesn't feel like an expression of anxiety, even though clearly there's something a little bit odd, let's say, about it, or as this article I was reading says, it's perfectly normal, so nothing odd about it. Like we do it all the time. But yeah, and it did start making me think about periods of time in which I don't mean state moments of, like where you're about to go on and perform, or about to go on and give a presentation where your heart rate goes up. I don't mean that kind of nervousness, but I mean more like a sort of trait anxiety, or anxiety which persists over a long period of time.
Okay, that's a really interesting question, because you earlier on in this conversation said we're not going to talk about self-diagnosis.
Oh, good point.
And I think that there's a slippage around the idea of anxiety and suffering from anxiety, and the fact that anxiety and depression, I think, is a kind of an envelope term that captures certain types of behaviours. I would say my nature is that I am a worrier, but I would not say that I suffer from anxiety. So I would say, yes, I am a worrier. I overthink things, but I don't overthink things to the point where it becomes debilitating. What I do is I rehearse. I rehearse in my head the things that I am worried about. And sometimes I have to step away from that and just sort of say out loud often, stop it. Stop it. This isn't useful anymore.
So it's not taking over in the sense that you're able to stop it.
It can take over if I don't market, if I'm not mindful of what is happening, I can get lost in it, I think, like anybody. But what I can do is just sort of say out loud, okay, stop it, this is silly, this isn't achieving anything, this isn't doing what your subroutine wants you to do. So when I walk the dog in the morning, I don't have headphones on, I don't go with any
podcast or whatever.
yeah, no, I don't do that. I walk the dog, and I am with the dog, and I am with the weather, and I am just in the world. And some of that means that I'm looking at seals, some of that means that I'm looking at birds, some of that means I'm trying to figure out what I've got to do over the course of the day. Mm-hmm. And I do take a telephone with me so that I can record voice notes for things that it's like, oh, mustn't forget that, just blah, 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 and then, move on. So it sort of, lots of it will depend on the weather. If it's a really beautiful sunny day, I'm just looking at things. But if it's sort of a bit of a blah day, quite often the subroutine of what's happening will take over.
So you end up sort of lost in thought, sort of ruminating type.
Yeah, and sometimes I find myself, I guess, worrying. I guess you could frame it in that way. But I'm worrying, I think, in the way that a dog worries a bone.
So turning it over.
So I worry at it rather than I worry about it. So I'm trying to make a solution come to the fore, but that's where I do occasionally have to step outside of the thought and go, stop it. This isn't helpful. You're being silly now. Because, I don't catastrophize, but I do get into rows. What a shock. Lee David Miller gets into rows with people in his head, which I don't do in real life. I'm not a particularly combative person, except in my brain. I have lots of arguments.
Do you? Are you good at arguing in your brain?
Not usually the first or second time, but usually by the third time I've got it sorted.
You start winning.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of I guess that's sort of an anxiety. I guess that's sort of a coping mechanism. That if that person comes along and presents in this way, how am I going to manage it? So I've got a meeting.
Yes, you wouldn't be doing that if you had nothing. If
No,
you had no concerns about.
No. So on Monday, I've got I've got 2 meetings that are potentially high temperature, but at the same time they're low stakes. Very low stakes, but potentially high temperature, if that makes sense as a distinction.
I'm not sure it does, actually. Low
stakes in the sense that this isn't something that anybody really should lose sleep about.
Right.
But because
they might... Go on, sorry.
Well, I was going to say, because they sit within somebody else's purview, that person will feel a sense of ownership of the problem, and they are...
Gotcha.
But ultimately... if we all took just even one step back and look at it, we go, this isn't really a big deal. So because it's potentially high temperature but actually low stakes.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter in the long term, basically.
No, exactly. So my preparation for that is to simply say, you know what, just be chill about it. Just regulate your emotions and try to make it as safe and comfortable an experience for the people in the meeting. Don't try to win something here, because the win isn't useful. Pursuing the win is not useful. So those are conversations that I've had in my brain. Have to be honest, I don't have them very much in this job. I used to have them a lot when I had more people above me.
Oh.
And I had to do more convincing people as to why the decision they were making wasn't okay, or why we should do it this way. Yeah.
Are you suggesting that because there are, let's say, fewer people above you, but does that mean that because universities are super hierarchical, doesn't matter how much we talk about flat structures, the hierarchy is kind of, it's assumed. It's embedded and assumed, right?
They are definitely arborescent. They are not at all rhizomatic.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Deleuze, and the other guy whose name I can't remember.
You're not tricking me into saying it.
Yeah, I was trying though, wasn't I?
No, I'm not falling for that.
Guattari.
You know how to say
Italian.
it.
It's Guattari Italian.
I don't know.
Sounds very Italian.
Anyway.
And so it does sound as if you're saying or implying, and correct me if this is not it's not fair, that because your voice carries more weight effectively in more conversations, you have to do less work convincing people because your voice carries weight and people effectively, I'll just say it, do as they're told. And I'm being a little bit facetious about that because I know it's not as simple as that. But does that means that's more relaxing for you? Or am I just barking up the wrong tree to drop in another metaphor there?
No, I think it's less about that people will do as they're told, or even that I feel that I'm in a particularly high up
Powerful
branch of a tree. It's more about, because I only really have to explain myself to one person who I see regularly and have a very good working relationship with, I'm not over-indexing decisions that are being made. So it's not, oh, look at this, everybody has to do what I say. It's really not that. It's not even close to that.
So it's about the clarity of it's about the kind of clarity of the position more than I'll say the height of it.
Absolutely. I think that is a perfect description, because when you're a program leader or a course leader in an and you're dealing with a lot of undergraduate students, and you've got often
I've never done that. I only did that for masters, but I managed to avoid it. Don't tell my colleagues at my old university.
So when you do that, and I guess probably in our subject areas not so much anymore, but in the olden days, you could be doing this for, upwards of 200, 300 students. Rare. It would be a rare
halcyon
chance.
days. Talk about halcyon days. I mean, it's hard to... that wasn't that long ago. That was 2010, 2011, my last job. So that's, less, just over 10 years ago. That was, but now it's like 20, 30, if you're lucky.
Absolutely.
If they still exist.
Yeah, exactly. But even in that relatively short period of time ago, if you were a program leader and you were responsible for, let's say, 200 students, and that's 200 individual voices, that's 200 individual people with individual concerns, worries, anxieties, things that they were trying to figure out as they were transitioning from being a child, last week, to being an adult. Yeah, so we're in a particularly febrile and high emotional window of people's lives. And I think
where the stakes feel high.
Absolutely.
Students, but they aren't really that high.
No, they're not.
Because nothing really matters at that age except everything really matters.
Exactly. And it's catching. It's I worked with a colleague.
You mean it's viral? You mean it's infectious?
It's
in the
infectious.
Sense that people get it?
I think the fully cooked adults who are around them also carry that sort of slightly overstimulated nervous system with them.
Totally. I feel by the end of the term, you just be wiped out. Your nervous system would be just completely wiped out.
Yeah, I walked out of an induction session one year with a colleague who just went, "Oh God, could you smell that?" And I said, "Smell what?" And he went, "Just the hormones." And I don't know if he was being facetious and silly, or if he genuinely meant that, kind of like on an olfactory level, he was smelling people's emotions, which we know from a kind of a neurological perspective is an actual fact. I don't think he really can smell their hormones, but I know, it's...
Corbetron is our fact checker, and he'll be writing in if we're wrong anyway.
Well, Psychoneuroendocrinology is what we're talking about. It's an emerging but established field of brain science. So we know that people can. It's about chemical and electrical entrainment. We've talked about this before, but definitely we're talking about chemical entrainment there. And so that idea that you can, if you're in a room full of brains that are still developing and are pumping out a huge number of hormones, you're going to know, whoa, this feels. Everything's like, oh. So I think what I'm saying is going from that kind of a room into a management meeting about those kinds of people, you start to find yourself, and I know that you have been in rooms where this has happened, somebody saying, no, I have to have that studio space because it's the most important studio space for these students. You can't not let them have that studio space. And if you took a step
that are
back,
low stakes again become really high stakes, as if they really matter. Hang on, what are we talking about here? A studio? Really? And we're getting het up about that?
Yeah, and we really
Take
are.
a chill pill.
But nobody does. But nobody takes a chill pill. Nobody takes that step back. Everybody's just like, oh, it's got to be that, and you are disrespect. It's like, whoa. Somebody somewhere is just going, well, the meter cubed of that space costs this. Because somebody somewhere made a. I love the moment where university space audits went from meter square to meter cubed, so they could really kick your ass on how tall a ceiling was. And you pay more for that. But you know, it's that thing that I don't have to worry about. So that's why I mean, it's not about a hierarchical position. It's about that I'm in a different type of room, and the conversations can be a little bit more like, whew, okay, wow.
Yeah, it actually, because I mean, of course, I was thinking about, you know, partly I was thinking about it because of intrusive thoughts, but also because when I was at the dentist, I saw a specialist. This was I can't remember how long ago it was now, given what this episode is, and a couple of weeks ago, and especially someone who just does root canals. That's all he does, root canals, and you get pretty good at it, I reckon. Probably not many things are too funky or too disturbing. Things I actually asked him about that. How many times does this thing? Are you surprised? No, he goes, nah, I'm never surprised.
Wow.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, surely there must be outlier situations which are a little bit on the edge. But he's also at a teaching hospital as well, so a teaching university, hospital/university. So he's also involved heavily in research in the area as well as seeing patients all the time. So he's in that, you know, lovely place between, as they say, practice and theory. And he said, that's a very long-winded way of saying something he said to me, which was the number of root canals he's doing now, that the nature of them has changed because it's not tooths, it's not teeth being bloody plurals, not teeth being chipped or cracked by as we're getting older, and you know, which is what happened to me. I bit into a piece of grain and it chipped my tooth when I first had it crowned. That post-pandemic, it's all been grinding.
Whoa!
Yeah. So all this research that's gone on into the nature of root canals and all the sort of associated treatments, etc., is effectively a little bit redundant, or is becoming, it's sort of slightly dated, because they're having to do all this new research, which is about people at much younger ages dealing with anxiety post-pandemic, and the outcome of all that teeth grinding is needing root canals. People are killing their teeth. Yeah. It's a lot of cortisol. It's a lot of cortisol pumping around your body, isn't it? To behold it, clenching your jaw over when you're asleep all the time. I grind my teeth as a teenager. I've got very flat teeth across the front there in the middle, and I always say something about them. And I'm pretty sure I don't grind my teeth now because I don't wake up with a sore jaw that I remember as a teenager doing.
Wow.
Amazing, eh?
Yeah.
Anxiety.
I work with somebody whose background is in childhood mental health, and now she's transitioned into an arts and health space. And she regularly will just say, "We are sitting on a time bomb of mental health." And she said, "Yep, you think it's all the kids who were at high school? Nah, it's the ones who were 2 and 3. It's the ones who were born during the pandemic. It's the ones who didn't go to toddler groups. That stuff is going to be so deep down."
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, I think it's one of the terrible mistakes that was made. I think it was made with the best of intentions, but how long kids were kept away from schools during the pandemic was clearly a mistake. Again, not at the time, but with the benefit of 2020 hindsight. It was too long, too long.
Yeah.
Given what we know now about the virus that we didn't know then.
Yeah. Poor, but it's tricky, isn't it? We're making these decisions, or the decisions were being made on the fly. And I suppose as a gentle end towards today's recording, we're now at the point of recording, we're just over a full week into our first Labour government since 2010, so for 14 years.
Yeah.
And
this is just an update for anyone who's all international. There was an election a couple of weeks ago, and it was a massive, massive victory for the Labour Party. Only the 7th ever Labour Prime Minister, which blew my mind.
Yeah, which tells you just
that's how conservative this country is. Just to be clear, like, it is important to remember that it's not. These are exceptional situations that mean you have a Labour government.
And I think one of the things that is fascinating is that historically we have always been conservative because we are a serf nation. We're built
as an SERF. You Australians listening, different kind of surfing.
Yeah, I mean there's some in the northeast, there's some in the southwest, but there's not a lot of surfing in the UK. Although,
you got very thick wetsuits, that's for sure.
Yeah, but. Some of my cold weather surfer friends would say, it's what keeps you alive. I think the conservativeness of the country is hard to unsettle, which is why I think so many world leaders have been a bit struck by Starmer bucking the trend of the rest of the world, of its massive swing to the far right. And I suppose...
sorry.
Go on.
Are you happy that Keir Starmer is the Prime Minister?
Yeah.
Or is it just better than relative to?
Well, it's interesting because if you'd asked me that on the day after the election and I said out loud to Bob, I really struggle because I don't know what he stands for. I don't know what his ideological position is. He doesn't seem to have any centre. He doesn't seem to have a compass, and I really struggle with that. And Bob, she listens to lots of very clever women talking about politics, understandably. And they did a little bit of, well, you don't really need to worry about what he personally stands for, because what he stands for is change. And I thought, well, what does that mean? And then in the last week, it's like, fucking hell.
What's he done?
Quite a lot. You know, he's taken on the prison service and gone, nope, that's not going to work. He's taken on offshore oil and natural gas. Like, nope, that can't go on. And he's behaving in a way that is, say it quietly, relatively left-wing. And I think not necessarily in keeping with what he was saying when he was campaigning. It's almost like he played a game, a political game, and knowing
I
that
assume that from the beginning. I just assumed that's what he was doing, was that he knew that he went down, if he placed himself on that an ideological position there, he would lose a bunch of voters. That's right. That was my assumption, that he was, he's a human rights lawyer, for God's sake.
But what's interesting is people on the left got so very angry about his apparent lack of care for human rights in the way he was campaigning, is that now he's doing stuff that feels like it's on, it's moving in the right direction. And there's lots of things that I'm still uncertain about. But at the time of speaking, we're barely a week into the new parliament. So, that's just to observe that. And I might feel differently in 6 months' time for the positive or for the negative. But it's moving in the right direction from my perspective. But and this is what I was going to talk to you about, is people, they never seem to be happy. Because it's like, oh, he's not doing enough. It's like, he's had a week. What were you expecting? He's done this. Yeah, but, it's not enough, though, is it? It's like, it's still a week. It's still a week.
Surely you'd want him to bring as many people along with him as possible. Surely.
Well, I just found...
So we don't end up swinging back to being a conservative country.
Yeah, I just had a moment of thinking, goodness me. But again, it was people on the left of the spectrum who were angry that he wasn't doing more. And I just found myself going, just take the win. And anyway, well, I feel happy.
So a pass mark
today.
So far.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Right, see you next week.
Ciao.